Sri Lanka, 2009. The president of Sri Lanka at that time started pushing to build a new port in a small town at the south end of Sri Lanka. Yet, Sri Lanka had a profitable functioning port, the Colombo port, the world's 25th busiest container port in fact. So why then build another port? Simple, because ambitious projects like this that promises prosperity make you look like a good caring politician. The only problem was that everyone, including Sri Lanka's government, indicated and estimated that the port would not be profitable. Even when they approached their neighboring Indian companies, they said the project was going to be a flop. But then the president announced the project has been given a green light with the help of none other than China. The Chinese government's Export-Import Bank gave them a loan of $307 million. On the surface, this looks very generous. Yes, we the Chinese government helping a developing country build infrastructure when other selfish countries wouldn't help. But it came with some clever terms. Term 1, the port will be built by China Harbour so that it will look like this money is going into the developing countries like Sri Lanka, but then it's going right back into the Chinese economy because it's being built by China Harbour, thereby providing no risk at all for the Chinese government. Term 3, that the Sri Lankan government will let the government of China know exactly who is coming in and out of the port. 2 years had passed since the new port opening in 2012 and the forecasts were right. No one was interested in Sri Lanka's new port and its finance were in the hole. Sri Lanka, unable to pay the loan back to China, found itself at the mercy of the Chinese government. Their only option is to renegotiate with the Chinese government and let them cancel this debt. Oh, I forgot to mention, they owed the Chinese government $3.7 billion after collecting series of loans after the initial $307 million. Yes, of course, the Chinese government didn't cancel the debt. Now, China owns 85% of the port and managed to squeeze 15,000 acres of land around the port, which adds to infrastructural projects in China's growing portfolio around the world. So, if not profits, what motivated this extravagant investment? When you look at it deeply, Sri Lanka is geographically blessed not only with proximity to the global shipping lanes, but just 34 miles at its closest point to India, one of China's closest rivals. Coincidence? Maybe. And where does China have their eyes set on now? You guessed right, Africa. China's interest in Africa. It's no doubt that China is a global power country. Of course, just check the back of your household item to your kid's toy. For many countries from Asia to Africa to parts of Europe, China has become the most important economic partner. In 2009, China surpassed the US to become the biggest trade and debt trap diplomacy partner. China's overseas development policy or interest in Africa has been described as a debt trap diplomacy because once an indebted country fails to service its loans, it becomes vulnerable to pressure from China to support its geostrategic interests, which includes oil, resources, raw materials, energy, and military base, which is present in Djibouti in Africa, becoming China's first overseas military base. Due to debt trap diplomacy, China has surpassed the United States oil imports, with over a third of China's oil coming from African countries. Africa has roughly half of the world's stock of manganese, an essential ingredient for steel production, and the Democratic Republic of Congo on its own possesses half of the world's cobalt and coltan, which is needed for electronics. China basically needs Africa for long-term economic and political stability. China's strategy and approach offer to build infrastructure. You, the Chinese government, have your state corporations and banks, then go to these less developed countries or LDCs, least developed countries, and offer them loan to build infrastructure if there is no existing infrastructure. You start with mines, power plants, water plants, the basics. These countries will inevitably say yes to all this because debt is like petrol fuel. If the debt is used properly, it increases productivity and creates more jobs, which would scale the country to prosperity. With most politicians getting this offer, they only see the good in it, which makes them look like saviors of this nation, bringing in jobs, urbanization, and this also looks great to the citizens, which in fact is for their selfish benefit and interest. In simple terms, they are notable for corruption. But as these infrastructures get bigger, more complex, more expensive, they require more forecasting from experts. That same petrol fuel that can take you to prosperity can also make your nation crush and burn under these debts. These infrastructural projects might be risky and expensive and also might not be profitable. So in a nutshell, it's easy to sell, and these countries practically will always say yes. But again, they only give them the loans under the condition that its Chinese companies and corporations would build and construct these projects at inflated price. Therefore, the money goes from the state-owned banks, which is China, to these LDCs, least developing countries or developing countries, right back into the pockets of these state-owned enterprises, which is going back to China, which includes the famous CRCC, China Railway Construction Corporation. Yeah, I'm sure you must have seen this logo or name handling major projects in your country, especially in Africa. Most loans and aids that Chinese government give, there is a ratio of 70 to 30 approval. 70 of the project will be handled by Chinese companies and 30 by local firms. If the project ends up being profitable, everyone wins. But if it underperforms, like Djibouti, which owes about 80% of its GDP to China, China would have more leverage over this nation. Almost all the financial system of loans that China gives to Africa has been backed or has been backed up by natural resources, just like DRC Congo that could not pay back its loan to China, thereby China collecting DRC Congo's natural resources as collateral, thereby China influencing these countries all under the Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion initiative of the Chinese government, which makes large-scale loans available to countries seeking to build infrastructural projects, launched in 2013 by Paramount leader Xi Jinping. When you look at Africa today, China has strategically positioned itself economically at around $200 billion per year. Africa exports 15 to 16% of its goods to China, goods like minerals, fuel, lubricants, metals, while Africa imports 14 to 21% of goods from China, goods like machinery, transport, telecommunication equipment, and so on, meaning we both have a productive relationship. China has invested a staggering $300 billion in Africa. That's $300 billion has funded 40% of all infrastructural projects in Africa. There is the $3.2 billion 290-mile long rail in Nairobi, Mombasa, the largest infrastructural project in the country. There is a $3.5 billion 470-mile electric railway in Ethiopia that became engulfed in corruption. There's another light rail system in Ethiopia, funded, built, and operated by China, which ended up consuming a quarter of Ethiopia's 2016 budget. There is Djibouti, which was vulnerable to debt distress, which also had debt swelling from 50% to 80% in just 2 years, which hosted China's first overseas military base. As earlier said, Nigeria had to renegotiate its deal with China contractors because it could not pay up. Kenya's railway went 4 times over the original budget, or 6% of its GDP. Angola borrowing $42.6 billion from China between 2020 to 2019, which it now repays in form of oil shipment. On the other side of the story, when you look at these African countries, the majority of them actually happily welcome Chinese investment, which is understandable.
And China's done more in Africa than anywhere. I don't care. You could say UK, America, Germany, British. I don't care who you call. No one's done more work in China to benefit Africans than the Chinese.
Africa basically saw China's astronomical growth from very similar humble beginnings and hoping that they can replicate China's success. This infrastructure have improved standard of living and provide jobs. And also, Chinese construction are cheaper than Western construction. With Chinese assistance and loan, it gives a long-term payback, which most Africans enjoy. And also, the West don't give a long-term payback. That's why most African countries prefer Chinese loan. As the former governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, said, "We must see China for what it is, a competitor. Africa must recognize that China, like the US, Russia, Britain, Brazil, and the rest, is in Africa, not for African interests, but its own." I think the relationship between Africa and Chinese government is probably a lot like the relationship between Chinese government and Chinese entrepreneurs. As long as you are moving in the same direction as their agenda, all is well. But as soon as you step out of the line, the sickle comes down on you. So what do you think of China's involvement in Africa, the same country where we have education camps, disappearing billionaires, Taiwan, and a whole host of other problems, has perfect win-win relationship with these African countries with no ulterior motive. That is up for you to decide. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. See you on the next one.